Mheshimiwa Speaker, that letter that you're reading was also shared with the media. And it's true, there's no contract between Social Health Authority and the consortium of Safaricom. But there is a contract between the Ministry of Health and that consortium of Safaricom to provide a digital system that is going to enable institutions like SHA, KEMSA, and others to access the system to connect all hospitals across the country.
So you actually have the information. So why are you asking us the question? You should be giving me the information.
Deputy Speaker, if you're following the conversation, he raised the question and said that he sees Adani in the system.
Oh, okay.
I asked him a question, where is that? What is the connection?
Yes.
But he has also raised the question about the cost itself, which has not been explained by anybody.
Yes. And that's why the lessons we have learned from what has happened so far up to now, I said this earlier. The president clearly talked about issues of corruption, and he said that must be looked into, and he pledged that he will lead from the front on that issue. We also learned lessons from what happened with the Adani deal, was also that Kenyans felt that it was shrouded in mystery and they didn't know anything about it. So lesson we have learned is that we must carry the public from the beginning to the end. And we are saying it is right for the public to question these issues. And the president clearly said that in his State of the Nation address. Right. He said that Kenya is a democratic country. Protests are within our constitution. The questioning government is within our democracy and part of our rule of law. And we shall continue to listen. And he listens to the public, and he will continue to act and allow public participation in these issues. So we've learned, these are the lessons I've learned. And that's why I said, if I were to do it, if I were in the executive, and if I were to go back, I would tell myself, I will advertise very publicly, ensure that you carry the country when you're doing the expression of interest. When you have the shortlist, inform the public that the following people have applied. Right. When you select whichever company you pick, you will say it's because they qualified more than this other person because they had this and that and that. And then you explain why it's good for the country, how much it will cost, and what would be the alternative if you did not take this.
Time has been spent. Kenyans have been engaged to the point of signing a program. Even if you don't lose money because it's a PPP arrangement, you have lost time and money invested by officials looking at those documents.
The operative word here is procurement process. Procuring is a process. Decision-making is a process. Do you know that half the time when you sit in public office, which I've sat in, is that you're negotiating things. You may find that only 30% of them are the ones that actually go to full conclusion. So that is part of the job. Because you can't just make the decision on a snap minute.
Deputy Speaker, when you look at it, he also says that one of the quickest ways of dealing with this is to get investors from the country. This looks a bit untidy because these local investors were still existent even before we went looking for Adani.
I think many countries strive and work towards making sure that sometimes these public-private partnerships come from within the country. But I think in Kenya it's a tall order. We don't have that kind of resources. Countries like China do. That's why they have so much in excess that they are actually bringing their own private investment money from pension funds, and equivalent of NSSF is what they bring in to come and invest in Kenya. I think going forward, we still have no choice. We'll still have to go into public-private partnerships. That is my personal opinion. I just think the lessons learned from what has happened now is that it's important actually to make it public, probably advertise for requests for expressions of interest from anyone, and make sure that there's some public participation and explaining to people that we need to fund the following projects, and explain to Kenyans our transmission lines are coming to end of term, which means we could end up with no electricity like South Africa. And so, we explain that. So I think public participation, explaining to the public, explaining which projects need to be funded, and then making sure you publicize and open up the ability for everyone to apply. And then as you're going through the application process, You can notify that the following companies have advertised. Let Kenyans be able to be sensitized about it. I think that's the way to go. I think that's the lessons that we have learned from what has happened now.
Okay, Honorable Mbui, so where do you go from here? Because, so Deputy Speaker, do you believe action needs to be taken against people that were involved in the procurement process, but is there even a reason enough for investigations?
No, I think that one you also have to ask yourself. In law, there's something called the doctrine of ripeness. Is the matter ripe for prosecution? Was there an agreement done? Did anything go wrong? Did government lose any money? And also the Procurement Act talks about if you are acting in good faith, then it's not and even if you make a mistake, it's not a basis for prosecution. So I think what's important, that those are very sweeping statements. They are referring to an agreement. Yeah, but is there an agreement?
There was one for Ketrako, wasn't there?
Sorry? No, I'm saying, I don't think like most people. I think I'm a lawyer, so I think of it in a way that if you ask me something, I just won't speculate and tell you, I think we should do this. I'll say, I would look at the facts. Is there an agreement? At what stage had the agreement done? Was it within the procurement law? Sorry, I'm saying, I do not know that for a fact. Yes, they're talking about that there was an agreement. I haven't seen an agreement. If I saw that agreement, if you give me a copy of that agreement and see where it has reached, what expenses were incurred by government, and how far government was exposed, I would give you a very clear legal opinion as to whether someone should be charged or not. But I can't just say it as a sweeping statement.
No, that's okay to comment as a lawyer, but when the president is cancelling the procurement process, but also...
Procurement process is the start. It's a negotiation.
Let me just finish. It was a procurement process for the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport expansion project. But for Ketrako, a deal had been signed and even announced by the Minister, Opiyo Wandayi, who even appeared before Parliament on that particular day and said that he does not think that the events in the US are going to affect this particular one, affecting the energy sector.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. I would only comment on things that are facts within my knowledge.
Because the essence of this question, Deputy Speaker, is time has been spent. Kenyans have been engaged to the point of signing a program. Even if you don't lose money because it's a PPP arrangement, you have lost time and money invested by officials looking at those documents.
The operative word here is procurement process. Procuring is a process. Decision-making is a process. Do you know that half the time when you sit in public office, which I've sat in, is that you're negotiating things. You may find that only 30% of them are the ones that actually go to full conclusion. So that is part of the job. Because you can't just make the decision on a snap minute. This is required. It's like when someone is even during the procurement process, you'll find that there'll be an expression of interest. Then after the expression of interest, there'll be a feasibility study that will be done. There will be, environmental impact assessment that will be done. It will go back and ask for somebody setting out specifications, spending a lot of time and money to be able to come and present this. So it's a back and forth. That is why I'm saying the operative word is procurement process. It's a negotiation process, if you put it simply. So there is so many checks before you get to it. Sometimes you spend the entire year negotiating a procurement. Before you actually implement it. And I think, Sam, you know me, I've been coming to this station for many years.
Yes.
I have never speculated. I only speak to facts that are within my knowledge. If it's not within my knowledge, I'm humbled enough to admit to you that I do not have those facts.
Which is fine. I mean, I have no problem with the answer, Deputy Speaker.
Is that we need to improve our airport, period. First of all, Kenyans should be ashamed. Our airport is made of canvas. Remember, after the airport burnt, the canvas is built on the runway. You know, it's on tarmac, So it's in a pathetic state. If we want to be the leaders in Eastern Central Africa like we boast we are, we must do something. And we are saying we do not have the resources to build that airport. The only way we can raise resources, like we said, it's taxes, borrowing, or PPPs. That's the only way. And it's clear that taxes is not an option. Borrowing further is not an option. So the public-private partnerships, which is what used the world over, is the only way to go. You just need to go and see what Ethiopia has done with the public-private partnerships. Ethiopia has overtaken us by tenfold. Rwanda has done the same thing. It is the only way that we can move forward. So that be in agreement.
Is it really the only way? Because at a cost of 260 billion shillings, and this is an investment that will be put, was to be put by Adani, and they would be there for a whole 30 years. You're telling me you cannot find 260 billion shillings in 5 years?
Okay, why don't you tell me a few ideas where to get it?
No, I'm asking you because, I mean, 260 divided by 5 years is 52 billion shillings. We cannot find 52 billion shillings in our finances.
Yes. Yeah, remember...
Some 250 billion is just a serious amount of money for this economy.
Allow her to finish.
Yeah, we were part of this conversation. We sit in Parliament. Where there is discussions, you're literally, if the other day we were having conversations on not being able to pay NHIF debts of 5 billion, so that's what I'm saying. I think we need to educate Kenyans on how tight...
The NHIF debt is out of mismanaged resources. It's not a problem that Kenyans created.
That's okay, but I'm just saying we have acknowledged, this current government has acknowledged there's a debt. Whether it was because of mismanagement or whether it's not the issue. The issue is we have a debt. And there's been a struggle. They paid 1.5 billion before, then they're paying 3.5 billion this week, and so on. So when you talk about we can't find 52 billion, we can't even pay for medical, which is urgent. So it tells you, what I'm just trying to tell you...
Let me ask you again, we cannot find 260 billion shillings in 5 years from the Kenyan economy?
Yes.
Even from the banks that we have in the country, they cannot finance that?
When the banks find, if you do domestic borrowing, which is one of the biggest problems, is that the interest rates are extremely high. But also it has an impact on the economy because it means the small, medium enterprises cannot borrow from the local banks because government is borrowing. So governments, as good economic sense, try not to borrow domestic. What we do is we borrow concessionary loans that are 1% and are usually long-term. That's why we borrow from international financial institutions. You guys need to go to economic school. At the moment, Kenya is walking a very tightrope, and I think the president has admitted to this severally, walking a very tightrope to make sure that we do not default on our loans. Niger, I think, defaulted. Which other country? Ethiopia defaulted. Yeah, Ghana defaulted. Kenya did not default. So we should be telling ourselves, as Kenya, we should be thanking God that we did not default. Because the moment you default as a country, you stop getting any concessionary loans, which means you have to borrow very expensive loans, and you'll be in debt for posterity.
Okay.
So I think that's the knowledge that Kenyans need to be explained. I always believe in accuracy.
Yep.
I know that when those issues, when these things come up, I don't necessarily was said to us, but I did ask the chairperson of SHA, this Social Health Authority. The confirmation was that there is no contract between SHA and any service provider on digitization of the universal health care software yet. So that's what has been confirmed. And I think what is important when we want to ask questions like that...
between the Ministry of Health and the consortium led by Safaricom Limited. Safaricom itself has confirmed that that deal was signed and agreed at 104 billion shillings.
Then it goes on to say that the existing contract that the Social Health Authority inherited was between the defunct NHIF and service providers of a system. So for me, I go by what I am told by the person who holds the information. And I want us to do this instead of speculating here.
No, we're not speculating much.
What is important, what is important is you can actually invite the chairperson of the Social Health Authority to come to this show and explain it, rather than try and get misinformation from myself and Honorable Mbui.
You know, Mheshimiwa Speaker, that letter that you're reading was also shared with the media. And it's true, there's no contract between Social Health Authority and the consortium of Safaricom. But there is a contract between the Ministry of Health and that consortium of Safaricom to provide a digital system that is going to enable institutions like SHA, KEMSA, and others to access the system to connect all hospitals across the country.
So you actually have the information. So why are you asking us the question? You should be giving me the information.
You know, Deputy Speaker, if you're following the conversation, he raised the question and said that he sees Adani in the system.
Okay.
I asked him a question, where is that? What is the connection?
Yes.
But he has also raised the question about the cost itself, which has not been explained by anybody.
Yes. And that's why the lessons we have learned from what has happened so far up to now, I said this earlier. The president clearly talked about issues of corruption, and he said that must be looked into. And he pledged that he will lead from the front on that issue. We also learned lessons from what happened with the Adani deal, was also that Kenyans felt that it was shrouded in mystery and they didn't know anything about it. So lesson we have learned is that we must carry the public from the beginning to the end. And we are saying it is right for the public to question these issues. And the president clearly said that in his State of the Nation address. Right. He said that Kenya is a democratic country. Protests are within our constitution. The questioning government is within our democracy and part of our rule of law. And we shall continue to listen. And he listens to the public, and he will continue to act and allow public participation in these issues. So we've learned, these are the lessons I've learned. And that's why I said, if I were to do it, if I were in the executive, and if I were to go back, I would tell myself, I will advertise very publicly, ensure that you carry the country when you're doing the expression of interest. When you have the shortlist, inform the public that the following people have applied. Right. When you select whichever company you pick, you will say it's because they qualified more than this other person because they had this and that and that. And then you explain why it's good for the country, how much it will cost, and what would be the alternative if you did not take this. So I think, let's agree, we now know that we must have involved the public.
All right. Deputy Speaker, what did you make of the statement of the President, but also specific to the issues that Honorable Mbui is raising?
I think, first of all, I think what's important for us to always, whenever we speak about something, it's to put it within a context. We know that in every country, not just Kenya alone, there is only 3 ways in which you can fund a country or run a country. 3 sources of running a country. 1 is by taxing. 2 is by taking debts. 3 is by entering into public-private partnerships to fund infrastructure projects. So, for example, we need roads, we need electricity everywhere, which we need dams like in Kathiani and so on. The only way we can fund those is by entering into public-private partnerships, which is still a loan, really, because you're just allowing someone to build it now, and then you can pay it over a year, 30 years or 20 years and so on. So it's very important to put it within that context. So every single day, every other country in the world is entering into public-private partnerships. And then also, remember when you start a process, when you start a negotiation, I'm a lawyer, and you start negotiations, somewhere midway, certain information comes to you. Right. And when you get that information, you're not going to sit back and say, I'm not going to change my mind because I had stood by this at the beginning. You can actually reverse your decision depending on information that you get. The president receives intelligence briefs. He also receives other intelligence briefs from partners, like World Bank and other countries where we have agreements with. And so, which Honorable Mbui and myself are not privy to. So when the president receives that information, I think we should laud him for having said, this must stop because I have now received other information. In fact, he said that while he was in Parliament. He says, remember, we have other partners that give us certain information. Even in the court process in Kenya, we have something called the power of review. A judge can make a judgment and becomes functus officio. That means it's closed. He no longer has any power over that case. But you can go back to the judge under the power of review and ask the judge to review their judgment because new facts which were not available at the time the judge made the decision has now become available. So the power of review is in the judiciary. It's in every decision-making process. And I think also, Honorable Mbui, again, it's also important to, that's why I said, I'm always worried of misleading Kenyans. When you talk about an indictment is not a conviction legally. An indictment, it means you've been proposed for prosecution. And then you will go through a legal process, and then if the evidence is sufficient, then you can be convicted. So I think it's important. We know information has come to the country that the Adani company has been indicted, but they have not been convicted. But even just based on that information alone, I think the executive...
You think indict is to...
Indictment, yes, indictment is not a conviction. It means they have to still go through the legal process.
You're saying it's proposal to what?
Okay, you know, in Kenya, when you say that so-and-so has been charged in court, it doesn't mean they've been convicted. So that's the meaning. So I think it's
charged.
Yeah, being charged. Yes.
Okay.
It's a word that is used in the UK. Yes, it's used in the UK and used in the US. Yeah, you've been indicted.
All right. Mr. Speaker, you were in the House, right?
Yes, I was.
Why were members so happy with that announcement?
I think what has happened is that I think what they were loading, it was a very brave move. Like I said, only fools don't change their minds. So I think it's the bravery that you can say we have received new information, or whichever decision is made, or that this we have discovered, we have received information from our partners, and now I've directed that we make the decision to cancel. So I think it's the bravery that that the MPs were loading. Even the time of the finance bill, it was the same thing. There are many leaders who, when they have put their mind to something, and if they were part of it, they don't have the guts to take it back. So the bravery, the sense of leadership, and the ability to take, take the fall.
So he changed his mind from what?
Sorry? No, I'm saying if you finish that clip, you'll see that when he went on, he mentioned that we receive information from other partners.
Deputy Speaker, you just said that members were happy with his bravery to change his mind, and you said only fools don't change his mind.
Yeah.
So he's changing his mind from what?
No, the Adani negotiations that were ongoing. Remember, nothing had been signed yet. These were negotiations that were ongoing, and as you proceed with the negotiations, there is always you seek information, you have disclosure documents that are given. And like he said, we have partners who also give us some other information. Yeah. And then based on that, there's an executive decision to cancel the contract. That, I think, is a very laudable move.
So then suggests that the entire process had the blessings of the president.
I think that is your speculation.
No, I'm asking you because you're saying...
I don't know that. I wouldn't use it that. These were ongoing negotiations. Every single day in government, every minute, all the persons who are in decision-making processes, whether CEOs of state corporations, chairpersons, boards, principal secretaries and ministers, are every day negotiating in order to reach a decision. Some decisions go to the full end, others are usually are cancelled, but it's just that they don't become so public.
Okay.
Yes.
So
it's not odd. It's like the way the doctors can decide when you go to hospital, they will say, we're going to take this procedure on you. And then after consultations and second opinions and so on, they can change their minds.
That's a very good example, but it's a doctor who is treating. So are you saying that...
It's a decision-making process.
Are you saying that the Adani deals...
I'm saying it's a decision-making process.
Let me just pose the question, because you've used a very good example of doctors. Are you also saying that Dr. William Ruto was the initiator of the Adani?
No, I'm not saying that. You're saying that. I haven't said that.
Okay. Now, and based on new information provided by our investigative agencies and partner nations, that the procuring agencies within the Ministry of Transport and Ministry of Energy and Petroleum immediately cancel.
Yes.
Who are these, our investigative agencies that gave information to?
I think we'll have to ask the head of state that, because I don't sit in cabinet.
Good answer.